Let's not treat AI as the magic bullet for everything. Okay, there's hard stuff to be done, and that hasn't been done. We need to have an honest conversation about why we don't get sufficient investment. We need,
but that's old-fashioned issues.
Correct.
That goes back to the sort of, that goes back to the things that I've been covering since I first became a journalist.
Exactly.
You know, issues of investment in Africa, returns on investments, corruption, the regulation. There's nothing modern and digital about those issues.
Yeah, but people shouldn't complain when China does the investment.
Right. I think,
you know, and because that's what you're going to see in AI.
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't invest, you will see it. Africa will turn to where it can get that investment. So don't complain down the road. That's all I'm saying. We need to be honest about this. We need to see serious investment taking place if we are to realize this opportunity.
and I think that's a completely apt analysis. And I think there's two things one can think about. First, I would advocate for African governments doing more on the demand side to help energize more market-based investment, which I think they can do in two ways. One is the more the public sector, the government moves to the cloud and uses AI, they create the demand that will energize some more free market investment. The more you can aggregate demand, much like the European Union did. If you can build a data center in Kenya and serve 6 countries in East Africa, then it attracts more capital for that data center and the electricity to produce it. But I agree with what Strive is saying. At the end of the day, there is a market imperfection. And the capital, therefore, will flow from China. Right. It will be basically the telecommunications playbook and the Belt and Road playbook modernized for AI, with Chinese subsidies for Chinese hyperscalers, ultimately with Chinese chips, using Chinese AI, and in all probability with African data moving to China. Or we can get the West energized, but I think we have to recognize that that does require development banks, development assistance. I don't really see the private sector meeting that need by itself.
Because the Chinese are actually doing the ecosystem right now for the long term, right? They're investing the most in their universities in these areas. They're investing the most in the energy, in the electrostate that's going to power all of this. They're actually investing the most in all of the things. The only place that they have a serious block is on the chips. And for whatever reason, the United States has decided for the time being to reduce that barrier by exporting the H200s. That's kind of where we are.
And it goes back to Ian's point about the geopolitics and is it impacting this now? We've just talked all about the hardware side, but you look at the diffusion report and they look at the DeepSeek adoption, right? So that is, we're seeing it real time, right? Before we even get onto the physical data center investment that may or may not come from China, the open source models are there because they're cheap, they're free, they're available. And to Brad's point, we don't quite yet have the answer in the West to countries that want to standardize on open source because they can't afford these things, what the alternative offer is. And I think that is something we need to address relatively quickly.
Let me give you a very concrete example, because at the end of the day, we have to land these conversations. Project Mission 300, spearheaded by the African Development Bank. Get electricity to 300 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. Who's partnered with the African Development Bank? European governments. Who's partnered with the European governments and African Development Bank? Foundations. Private sector. Where is the US in all of this? The government is nowhere to be seen. So, nature has horror of the void. If they leave the space empty, someone will use it. Then let's not cry, then let's not complain, then let's not argue that there is the goodies and the baddies. In today's world, there are choices, and countries will use the choices to get to something as basic as electricity.